Hi, I'm John Quigley, President and CEO of the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In these challenging economic times, it's imperative that our residents and businesses band together to not only shop Elmhurst, but buy Elmhurst whenever possible. We have great stores in our city center, Spring Road, Butterfield Road, York and Villette Streets, St. Charles and Route 83, North Avenue and Lake Street, along North York and even Grand Avenue. I ask for your help. Let's keep our tax dollars in Elmhurst.
Visit elmhurst.org to explore the new City of Elmhurst website. Find out the latest Elmhurst news, pay utility bills and parking tickets, report concerns, and much more. Elmhurst.org is an ideal way to discover what Elmhurst offers your business, your family, your life.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm John Quigley, President and CEO of the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry. I'd like to welcome you to our second Elmhurst Mayoral Business Forum, co-hosted by the Elmhurst City Center, our downtown business organization, and the Chamber of Commerce. We did one of these in the 2009 mayoral election, and we're back here in 2013. We're glad to have a live audience here, a live audience watching it on the web, via the World Wide Web, and then Elmhurst, Our Kind of Town, is taping the program and will air it on numerous dates before the April 9 consolidated election. So it's going to air Saturdays at 1 p.m., Sundays at 7:30 p.m., Wednesdays at 5 p.m., Fridays at 2 p.m., starting on March 22nd. So you'll be able to watch it plenty of time in advance of the election. Speaking of the election, the consolidated elections come up on April 9th, so that means it's time again for both the citizens of Elmhurst and across DuPage County and elsewhere in the United States to exercise one of their greatest rights as Americans by casting votes for their candidates of choice at the municipal, township, public school, park, and library levels of local government. Let's hope that the apathy and low turnout, typical of the voting public after a presidential election, does not occur this time around. Last November, I'm happy to say, nearly 72% of DuPage County's 560,000 some voters who were registered actually turned out to the polls. And believe it or not, that was a drop from the 76% of 551,000 voters who turned out in the 2008 presidential election. In the 2009 consolidated elections, less than 43% of Elmhurst's 28,455 registered voters, or only 12,055, actually cast a ballot. Despite the incentive of a four-candidate mayoral race to elect a successor to a retiring four-term incumbent whose contested 2005 election brought out 10,500 voters. Elmhurst's last mayor needed votes from just 16.4% of the registered voters to get elected. That is a stunningly small number. Hopefully, in our three-person race, we will have a much better turnout come April 9th and a much better showing at the polls by our voters. That vote on April 9th will be preceded by early voting at Elmhurst City Hall, thank goodness, originally not a site, but is now a site for early voting, as well as some other locations, but in Elmhurst, the City Hall is the place you want to go, and that begins on March 25th and runs through April 6th. I do have some housekeeping things I'd like to keep in order. First off, the format for our forum today. The candidates have been given 6 prepared questions that we will ask. They will all have up to 3 minutes to answer those questions. I don't think they're going to use all 3 minutes, but they have up to 3 minutes. In addition, each of the candidates will have a 2-minute opening statement and a 2-minute closing statement. Over the course of this evening's activities, there are index cards on your tables. You are asked, if you want, to submit questions via index cards. Those will be collected by Tom Paravola of Elmhurst City Center, and he will put them in categories to see if there's 5 questions that relate to this, 4 questions to that, 3 questions to another topic, and he will hand me those, and we hope to get up to 3 audience questions asked as part of our format. I will now introduce our candidates in the order by which they declared their candidacy for the mayor of Elmhurst. First, to my immediate right, our 7th Ward Alderman, Mark Mulliner. Mark, give him a nice wave. On my far right, 6th Ward Alderman, Steve Morley. Steve, nice job. And in the middle, 1st Ward Alderman, Diane Gutenkopf. Diane, give them a nice wave. We have also decided the order in which they will do their opening statements, and we've chosen that based on their position on the ballot. So their opening statements will be their position on the ballot. Closing statements, we will reverse that, and we will also do a rotating order for each of the questions. In this case, the candidate ballot has Steve Morley, Diane Gutenkopf, and Mark Mulliner in that order. So I will call on Alderman Morley to give his 2-minute opening statement. Steve?
John? Thank you. First and foremost, I do want to thank John Quigley and the rest of the Chamber for hosting this event and giving all of us an opportunity to discuss the issues that face us here in Elmhurst. I also want to thank all of you for taking time out during your busy day to come and see us. I can tell you this, it would take me 4 to 6 hours to knock on this many doors and meet everybody, so I truly appreciate it. Like many of you in this room, I run a small business here in town. I'm the president of Elmhurst-based Marketing Resources. We're an award-winning, national award-winning marketing services company. We employ over 25 people here in town, many of whom who actually live in town like I do. And I think that gives me a unique perspective to the Elmhurst business culture, not only from running a small business in town, but having those employees that come to town every day, eat and shop in town. I've been an alderman for 6 years. I'm an alderman in the 6th Ward. I'm currently the chairman of the Development Planning and Zoning Committee. I've been fortunate enough to serve on the EDC, the Economic Development Commission, a commission whose sole purpose is to promote business in Elmhurst. I've also had the opportunity while I was on the Finance Committee to be on the Retail Grant Committee, which is another great committee that helps new businesses come into town, provides them with incentives and ideas to help them be successful and keep the lights on. During the election season, many people will ask me what's my #1 priority or what's the #1 issue facing Elmhurst. And it's the same answer.
30 seconds.
It's the same answer. It's revenue. Revenue and having a strong economic engine for the city of Elmhurst is how we can provide the services that the Elmhurst businesses and the Elmhurst citizens deserve and need. And we need to be very mindful of that. The more we can create that economic engine and grow that economic base, the more we can provide those services versus cutting off. The more we can provide those services versus having to cut services. So I believe the largest opportunity for growth is in the commercial area. That's growth, not an increase in taxes, but growth, and that will allow us to increase our overall revenue share. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Next up on the ballot, Alderman Diane Gutenkopf. Diane, your opening statement.
Thank you. Thank you also for inviting me to be here tonight. This is really an honor, and I appreciate it. I think I'll tell you a little bit about who I am. I share a 1920s bungalow with my husband and 3 stepsons. And for the past 7 years, I've been the director of the Robert McCormick Museum at Cantini Park. I've served as 1st Ward Alderman since 2007. I volunteer in several places, including here in Elmhurst at United Community Concerns Association. And in addition, I'm an Illinois State Board of Education appointed educational surrogate parent. And this is an advocacy program that appoints advocates who oversee the special ed needs of children who live in residential facilities. For 25 years, I've worked in nonprofits, and this has given me a very strong sense of fiscal responsibility because nonprofits are really proficient at doing more with less. These are important skills that I think I bring to the Elmhurst City Council and that we need to adopt to ensure that when we do budget, we're budgeting appropriately and we're spending tax dollars wisely. I'm proud of a lot of accomplishments that I've had as 1st Ward Alderman, and some of these include the tremendous access that residents of the First Ward enjoy to their elected officials. Through my actions, I believe the ward is safer. We've installed new sidewalks, stop signs, and improved railroad crossings. In fact, I'm very happy that it's finally finished, but the West Avenue Railroad crossing has been completely rebuilt with a new pedestrian, a much wider crossing with a pedestrian and bicycle path that connects to 2 new sidewalks.
30 seconds.
I believe every elected official should communicate with residents and be responsive to their views, and I believe that easier access to elected officials fosters both the public's ability to know what's happening in town and the elected officials' increased level of accountability to that public. I believe this strengthens transparency in local government and helps elected officials make decisions with taxpayers in mind.
Thank you very much, Alderman. Our third candidate is Alderman Mark Mulliner. Mark, your opening statement.
Good evening. Thank you, as everybody else has thanked everybody for being here. We appreciate it, those who are watching on television. I want to stress a couple of things. I'm running for mayor because I want to make sure that the city of Elmhurst is doing its core functions. Its core functions come down to 3 items. It comes down to public safety, comes down to infrastructure, making sure that we've got an infrastructure that's strong and able to handle the needs of the homeowners and the businesses, and then it comes down to economic development. In economic development, it's great that we have this opportunity this evening to discuss those issues that are in front of us. We have tools available to us, and we're going to have an opportunity to express our views on whether we think TIFs are the appropriate thing, whether we feel that retail development through grants is the right thing to do, facade programs, other alternatives that we have. I'm a strong advocate in trying to make sure that we do 2 things, and that is to retain the businesses we have, which is the primary thing that we need to do right now, retain the existing ones and grow them, and then in addition to that, to try to bring in new businesses. And we need to focus on our location. We also need to focus on things that we can do that don't cost the taxpayers or the businesses anything. One of my issues that I have that I've been advocating all along is the fact that I think in the industrial park we need to look at a 6-story structure. Now, John Quigley is going to correct me and tell me it's the business park, but I think we should change the zoning up there so that it's a 6-structure environment, so that then people can come in and developers can come in and they'll get a return on their investment without us having to invest additional dollars. That has no impact on residential. There's 20 homes that are in that area. Those homes probably shouldn't be there. It's an industrial area. It's a light industry area. But I also want to make sure that as we're focusing on things, we focus on all of the commercial areas in Elmhurst, the ones on Riverside Drive, the ones on the south end of town. There's a number of different ones, and I just want to make sure that we focus on all commercial and industrial areas. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Crowd, give them a nice round of applause for We will now go to our 6 prepared questions. We are doing a rotating order. So for the first question, Alderman Mulliner will answer first, Alderman Morley second, and Alderman Gutenkopf third. The first question, tax increment financing, or TIF, is a public financing tool used for redevelopment and community improvement projects by using future gains in taxes to finance the current improvements that will create those gains. Elmhurst has TIF districts for the Central Business District, Route 83 and St. Charles Road, also known as Elmhurst Crossing Shopping Center, Lake Street, and now North York Street, featuring Mariano's Fresh Market, now under development. The question, what is your position on the use of TIFs as an economic development tool? Alderman Mulliner.
We've used TIFs for a long time. Since 1978 is when the state passed the law to allow us to do TIF financing. We've used them since the mid-'80s, and they've been an extremely effective tool for the city of Elmhurst. The first TIF that we put in place was downtown. Thanks to things such as the York Theater and them jumping onto the bandwagon, we've been able to do wonderful things down there to build that development and to entice businesses to move into that area. TIFs have been terrific for us. We look at the one that's at Route 83 in St. Charles. I'll never forget the day that Tom Marcucci came to me and he said, we got this whole thing backwards. We got a city garage sitting on Route 83. It shouldn't be sitting on Route 83. That's been one of the best tax incentive programs that we've had. We used it the appropriate way, and that one we're going to be able to retire in an appropriate amount of time, I believe. One of the things that I think we need to be very careful of as we use TIF districts is to make sure that we don't over-TIF. And I think right now we've got 4 TIF districts in place, and I think that's the right number of TIF districts districts in order for us to do what we need to in the city of Elmhurst. I think we have these other tools that we should be looking at, such as changing the zoning in the industrial park, looking at some other incentives, such as maybe, if we need to, look at using sales tax rebates, et cetera, in order to help the businesses out, rather than always using the TIF solution. This last TIF, we finally have an agreement with the school district. I believe that hopefully will pass with the city council. That's a terrific agreement, and it will make not only the school district and park district whole, but more than whole. So it's a very positive thing, and it's a lot of hard work went into that from the school district side and from the city side. So TIF districts have been a terrific thing. We have a great car dealership up on Lake Street that stayed because of the TIF district that we put in there. That was a TIF district that was kind of unusual. We brought properties together to make it so that car dealership would stay there. Kind of one of the stories that I tell about that is that was the time when Krispy Kremes was coming around and they wanted to come into town. I got more phone calls wanting us to put a Krispy Kremes up there rather than the car dealership. We would have gotten about $40,000 a year from Krispy Kremes, and they'd be gone today. We get about $1 million from the car dealership. Those are the types of things that we need to look at as city officials to make sure that we're using and setting up the right type of programs in town. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Next, again, what is your position on the use of TIFs as an economic development tool? Alderman Morley.
Thank you, John. I'm the chairman of Development Planning and Zoning at the city, one of the 4 committees that we have in the city. And I was fortunate enough to work with city staff and various agencies in studying TIFs and whether it would be appropriate to add a TIF. We actually started by going through the comprehensive plan and also had help from the EDC about where we should focus. The entire process took over a year and entailed dozens and dozens of meetings that included the public. We certainly have had some very successful TIFs in town. The 3 TIFs that we have in town right now are going to expire in about 9 years. We did add a 4th TIF just recently. I certainly don't believe that we need to TIF any more properties or create another TIF district at this time. In fact, coming out of my committee, it was our recommendation. Ultimately, we looked at 3 different locations to TIF in town, and we prioritized that North York corridor, which I think was the appropriate thing to do. We have officially put the other 2 areas in town that we were considering TIFing on hold. Simply put, the definition of a TIF is borrowing from future tax dollars to help incentives and put incentives in place today. Ultimately, we will get paid back. But really what this does is this creates an even playing field for the city of Elmhurst. There is a finite number of developer and commercial dollars out there, and we are in competition every single day with Oak Brook, Naperville, Lombard, Glen Ellen, you name it. Everybody is trying to get developers to come to the front door. Believe me, as much as I'd like to say, hey, Elmhurst is a great town and you should be here just because, that's not the playing field that we're in. So we have to deal with that every day. We have to give our professional city staff the tools that they need to go out and bring that commercial development into town. The 3 mature TIFs we have comprise only 3.3% of the total EAV in Elmhurst. The new TIF that we just put in place in North York comprises only 1.4%. So the total TIFs in aggregate together are less than 5% of the EAV in town. The last thing I'll say is that when you put a TIF in place, you need to be very, very sensitive to the other taxing bodies. And I'm very happy to say that last night, the District 205 School Board passed unanimously an intergovernmental agreement. And quite frankly, it's the most progressive intergovernmental agreement on revenue sharing in the state of Illinois. A lot of people ask me, why is this taking so long? And the fact of the matter is it's never been done before.
30 seconds.
And that's why it's taking so long. I'm very happy that we were able to work with all of our taxing bodies to provide them with what we'll call a revenue neutral situation at the very least, so that they are not impacted. I know that some of our fellow taxing bodies are also facing some difficult times right now, and we're actually able to release some funds in the next 60 days. So I'm happy we're able to do that. We're doing it in a manner that works with our fellow taxing bodies, and used properly and used legally, TIFs can be a very good development tool.
Thank you. Our third alderman, Alderman Gutenkopf, what is your position on the use of TIFs as an economic development tool?
Thank you. I think TIFs are an integral part of the city's toolkit. for promoting economic growth in Elmhurst. As you've heard, for years, we've had 3 TIFs that have offered great opportunities for business development. However, TIFs aren't a panacea. They must be approached carefully, and if so, then they're a really good part of the overall toolkit that we're using. They allow us to borrow against future projected growth to fund current projects. They allow us to purchase and aggregate land to create opportunities that might be more attractive for developers, and thus eventually result in higher property tax revenue for the taxing bodies as well. And I think that's a really critical component and something we've used very well in the TIFs. There are ongoing opportunities for us to do that in TIFs that aren't quite as close to expiring, and something that I expect we will be exploring very heavily in TIF 4. However, the real struggle with TIFs is that they can hurt other taxing bodies because they sequester the additional EAV growth for the 23 years over their lifespan. And that can cause those taxing bodies, like the school and the park district and COD and pension funds, some struggle. They have to search to replace those revenues from other sources. And they have to make up the rate of inflation growth that they lose because of the TIF district. I'm really excited about this intergovernmental agreement with District 205 because it reflects the fact that we as a city are coming to terms with how TIFs can be a struggle for other taxing bodies, and we recognize how difficult that is. So it gives us an opportunity to say we're creating a TIF for the future of Elmhurst. At the same time, we don't want to cause undue stress on other taxing bodies. So the TIFs that we have in place are going to allow us to enter into this agreement and ensure very little loss of revenue for those groups. So I do think that they're part of an overall toolkit, and they're not the only thing that we have. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. The next question, the order will be Alderman Morley, Alderman Gutenkopf, and Alderman Mulliner. Our question: the Central Business District TIF has provided funding for economic development incentives for both property owners and businesses. Many building owners have participated in the facade grant matching program, and more than 80 retailers have benefited from the Retail Development Grant Program. The question, Alderman Morley, what is your position on the use of grants as development incentives?
Thank you. I think appropriately used, grants are a great tool for development incentives. The 2 that you mentioned, the facade program in town, have recently been used not only for Pints, but the very building we're sitting in. And the facade program really allows for a win-win. Not only does it help the current business that wants to possibly improve, and it offers it to businesses that are existing in town, but it also allows Elmhurst to upgrade its look. So it's a great revenue share. I mean, it's a great grant program, and it does result in a win-win for both the property or business owner and Elmhurst. The other grant program that we have here in town is the Retail Grant Committee, or the Retail Grant, which has a committee that I served on. It's a fantastic committee that tried to entice new businesses to come into town, and they would present before a committee, and what was really interesting is you would have these people who wanted to come into Elmhurst, and they were very excited about their idea, but they were also there and they could get advice. Mr. Quigley was in those meetings, so it was a great incentive to bring those small businesses into town. Those grants range anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, and as any small business owner will tell you, that's a lot of money. You've got to worry about payroll every 2 weeks, and you've got retail square foot cost of $22 a square foot. That's real money. So anything that we can do to give our town the edge to entice those new businesses into town, we need to do. Now, some people will try to measure the success of a retail grant solely by sales tax alone. So if we give somebody a $5,000 grant to help them come into town and defer some of those expenses they have to get their doors open, they would have to generate somewhere in the neighborhood of $250,000 to $275,000 to pay the city back for that. But I think that's a short-sighted measurement. When we've got new businesses coming to town, first of all, the grant program keeps as many of those storefronts open as possible. It's a lights-on position. A rising tide raises all boats. But second of all, think about the businesses on either side of that storefront. If that storefront goes dark and you've got a shoe store on one side and a candy store on another side, That $10,000 or $5,000 that we give as a grant is helping everybody. Not only does it show new businesses when they're driving through town that this is a town that welcomes new business, but it also shows the businesses that are in town that we care about them. I want to fill that middle store so the other stores can participate in that traffic. Grants used can be a fantastic tool. I think if you walk down the center of York Road in our central business district, you'll realize how successful it's been. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Alderman Gutenkopf, what is your position on the use of grants as development incentives?
Thank you. I think grants are great. Applicants get to show off their business plans, their businesses, and the city gets to offer support in a targeted fashion. I think grants give the city council the ability to shape the direction of the district. Like the Central Business District, the City Council can have a voice in both the overall look of the area as well as a tool to identify businesses that will help flesh out the business mix. Through the grants, the city can identify retail gaps, and it has a little bit more leverage in who we choose as recipients. It gives us a chance to evaluate the potential business models and work with developers on their long-term goals. I, along with 2 other aldermen, have requested that the Finance and Council Affairs Committee of the City Council create a set of policy guidelines for grants such as these. And I looked at other area cities as models. I want to codify the grant process to make it fair to all applicants because I believe that our current case-by-case review basis is inherently capricious. A policy levels the playing field. And doing it this way fulfills the council's fiduciary responsibility to the taxpayers by rewarding businesses that both have a solid business plan and a high potential for success, as they proved to us through their application. Eventually, we would see a return on this investment through a thriving business district that returns sales tax revenue to the city and brings people into that area. Ultimately, I believe the city should fund businesses that we believe will contribute positively to the economics of the city. And I believe that existing businesses should be part of this conversation to determine the retail and service industry mix and to identify the gaps in town. And as mayor, I'll ensure that members of our business organizations continue to be involved in helping our other economic development team members identify the particular segments that we would want to target. People frequently come to me and say, we have too many X kind of stores in downtown. I don't think it's the city's role to say, I'm not going to let you open another X store. I think that's a market-driven decision. But I think a tool like these grants can help us say, you know what, we really are lacking in this service area or this retail area. If we identify the kinds of businesses we want to bring in, the grants can help us target that and strengthen downtown. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alderman. Alderman Mulliner, what is your position on the use of grants as development incentives?
I think that it's been a very clear demonstration of how effective they've been, both in the area of the facade program as well as bringing in new businesses through the $10,000 and $5,000 grant programs. Both have been extremely effective. We can look at all kinds of things that have been done. This building is an example. A lot of the buildings going down York Road are examples of how it's improved the appearance of downtown, which is one of the most critical things. The alley the walkway, the Schiller walkway, is an example of the facade program being used very effectively and finding an identified space that was not being able to be used before by opening up a new store there and new crepes. And it was done because of the fact that the facade program made that an inviting walkway to get down that street. So that type of a program is very positive for businesses. I also support the idea of using the grant program. What I want to make sure that we do, though, is, and this is one of my concerns that I have all the time, and that is that we don't pick winners and losers. We want to make sure that what we're doing is if somebody has a good business plan, that we allow those businesses to come into town. I talk about this periodically, and I've talked about it a few times at some coffees that I've been at, and that's the fact that businesses like the cluster. We hear a lot of concerns and issues about the fact that, well, we've got too many hamburger joints, or we've got too many of this, or we've got too many of that in town. As a city, that's not our responsibility. Our responsibility is to bring in businesses that feel that they're going to be able to succeed in town. The best example that I can use as to what I see as a very positive thing is that at the point when the community bank used to be the old jewelry exchange. If you remember when the jewelry exchange was there, a number number of jewelry stores came into town. Why did they come into town? Because they like to cluster. They like to be around other jewelry stores. There's a reason why they do that, and we as the city should not be choosing those winners and losers, but we should make sure that we can give an incentive to make sure that those businesses will come into town if they have an interest. So we need to make sure that we're doing the right thing to bring those businesses in and provide a level playing field. My other concern is to make sure that in doing that we're also making sure that if a business wants to expand, that we give that same opportunity to those businesses, because I don't want to see a business leave because they don't have the money in order to do an expansion. So we need to make sure that we're using those retail grants effectively, not only to bring in new businesses, but to allow those businesses to expand in Elmhurst. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. And since a couple of the aldermen mentioned it, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Angelo's Ristorante here in downtown Elmhurst for being our host site. Give Angelo's a nice round of applause, folks. As they mentioned it, more than $1 million in renovation and creation of a Rosalia's Deli. That's done very well in our downtown and been a great addition. So thanks to Josh and his entire crew here. Our third question, we will be in the order of Alderman Gutenkopf, Alderman Mulliner, Alderman Morley. Third question, tax abatement allows a taxing board to grant a taxpayer a stay of paying a tax for a short or long term for a total or percentage of the tax. Elmhurst has granted tax abatements for auto dealerships and other major producers of retail sales taxes. The question, Alderman Gutenkopf, what is your position on the use of tax abatement to support such development?
I support the use of tax abatements as just another tool in the city's kit that helps us encourage growth. I was on the Finance Committee when Lucky Motors came to Elmhurst and looked for a sales tax abatement, and that's proven fairly successful for us. I know this is a tool that works well and will benefit both businesses and Elmhurst. I think we want to use this tool for businesses that have demonstrated the potential to return the funding to us over the long term. I really believe that it becomes a kind of a trade-off. We're going to help you, but you have to show us that you're going to be successful. And these tools need to entice businesses to Elmhurst or boost stable businesses with that same long-term potential. I think it's really key to ensure that both businesses and other taxpayers benefit. The policy that I was talking about earlier for TIF incentives and grant incentives is going to be an important component of helping us to identify the kinds of businesses that are going to work well with these kinds of tax abatement incentives. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Mulliner, what is your position on the use of tax abatement to support development?
I think tax abatement is another one of those tools that we need to have in our toolbox in order to allow businesses to stay here and also to entice new businesses. As it was said earlier, there's definitely a need for us to have these tools available to us because other towns are doing this. If you look at Westmont, they've been doing a very effective job on getting car dealerships. If you look at some of these other towns that are in the areas, they're working very effectively at bringing in these businesses, and it's great to say that Elmhurst has this ideal location that we can get to everything, but at the same time we've got to allow these other tools to be available to us so that we can bring in these businesses, and it has been an effective tool. We've done that with a number of car dealerships in town in order to keep them there. I wish we had been able to keep a few others there by using them before they left town, but unfortunately it didn't work out for us. We lost a few dealerships that we shouldn't have. In addition to dealerships, there's other organizations that we should look at if they need some type of an incentive to come into town. In order for us to offset some of those taxes, I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of the fact that our focus needs to be to bring in more businesses. I mean, one of the questions that I know comes up, and I'll address it in a minute, but we don't just always want to raise taxes. We want to make sure that we're getting additional businesses in order to create that revenue, and this is a way to do it. But I agree that it needs to be a long-term situation where we eventually get those dollars back, and we either get them back from the business that's coming in or the adjacent businesses that are benefiting from those businesses staying in town.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Morley, what is your position on the use of tax abatement to support development?
Certainly tax abatement can be a successful tool. I think all three of us said that. What we call tax abatement, or what the question is calling tax abatement, the way we actually structure in town is a tax rebate. So the city of Elmhurst enjoys a 1% return on sales tax, or we call it our municipal tax. So take a $30,000 car that is sold in town. Ultimately, the city will reap a $300 tax from that, and that's certainly a benefit to us. When it comes to tax abatement or tax rebate, it's when that new business is going to generate that tax, but they need an incentive or a little help to get started. We use this tool to give some of that money back. So in the case of a car dealership that sells a $30,000 car, we get $300. We actually cut them a check back for $150 if our agreement was to give them 50% back on that tax agreement. Now, one of the big benefits that I like about a tax rebate, or about a tax rebate, is that it's consumer driven and it's sales driven. We don't actually have to dig into our pocket to give that money to that person. The harder they work, the better their tax rebate. So we don't have to write them a check to get started. If they make sales, they're going to participate on that tax rebate at the other end. It's worked very well for car dealers. It also allows us for a little bit of control, so that we're going to structure that tax rebate over 3, 4, 5, 7, 10 years. And we can put a cap on it every year as well. Because let's face it, when a new business comes into town, there are some costs as it related that the city bears when that new business comes into town. Cleanup, safety, you name it, there are some additional costs that the city has in working with that business and bringing that business into town. The other thing I like about tax rebates is that it can be a very targeted incentive. So instead of creating, let's say, spot zoning or something like that where that's illegal, we can actually target an individual business. Not only have we done it with car dealers, we also did it with OEC, the furniture dealer up on Church Road, and that's been very successful. When I get presented, and I was on the finance committee, and a car dealer came to us with a tax rebate proposal, what I like to see in a tax rebate proposal is a significant investment in that property. So not only is that person coming to me and say, hey, I want to build a successful business in town, I'm putting X million dollars into it. To me, that tells me that property tax is going up. And if that's a building that's unoccupied at this point, half a loaf is better than none. So I think it's a great way to provide an incentive. It's consumer driven, sales driven, so it doesn't come out of our pocket. It allows us to competitively compete, and if applied appropriately, has proven to be very successful.
Thank you, Alderman. Just a note, 35 to 45% of every retail tax dollar here in Elmhurst is generated by our auto industry, whether that be sales of new cars, old cars, and service on automobiles. So that auto industry is a big influence on retail sales tax generated in this city. We've reached the halfway point of our 6 prepared questions. I hope that has led some of you in the audience to think what questions you might ask. And once again, I'll remind you that you have index cards at your table. And if you want to do a question, please write that up. And Mr. Paravola from Elmhurst City Center will be collecting those near the end of our prepared questions, and we'll ask some audience questions. We move on to question number 4. Our order will be Alderman Mulliner, Alderman Morley, and Alderman Gutenkopf. Question 4, public-private partnerships allow for a government service or private business venture to be funded and operated through a partnership of government and one or more private sector companies. The city has entered into numerous public-private redevelopment partnerships with property owners, businesses, and developers, most recently for the Addison LLC, and soon for the Hahn Street Development Project, both here in downtown Elmhurst. The question, Alderman Mulliner, what is your position on the city's role in public-private partnerships?
This is another one of those tools that's available to us that we have taken advantage of in a number of different cases, and they have most times have been extremely effective for us. And I think that it's something that we definitely need to continue to look at and continue to use. The biggest issue is making sure that we do everything as open and transparent as we can, and make sure that the public understands what we're trying to do and what we're trying to succeed in. Most of the situations where we do that, we are also trying to make sure that we're creating an environment for things such as parking. The Addison LLC is going to create a significant amount of parking that's needed on Addison and in the downtown area. The same thing with the Hahn Street project, a significant amount of property for parking so that we can provide the necessary parking for this area. Those are the reasons why I think that these type of programs are very effective, and it also gives us significantly more control over that development so that we can be talking about specifically what we want to see in that development, so that if we wanted to, we can control what type of companies come in. If we do retail, we can control what type of apartments or condos or et cetera are in the building, what type of office complexes. Now, there's pluses and minuses to that, because I'm a strong believer that the free market should help us to determine what goes into a particular building, but at the same time, it does give us that power to be able to do some things that we may not be able to do normally. The Hahn Street project is going to be, once it's finished, once the RFP goes out and it's finished, is going to be a fantastic entranceway to the north end of Elmhurst, and it's going to provide us with an additional area for hopefully some retail and some apartment complexes. And one of the things that's really important to keep in mind is that in a downtown area, one of the things that you really want to focus on is creating a captive audience. And that type of a partnership where we create apartments where people want to move into gives us a large volume of people that are going to eat in our restaurants, go to our movie theaters, and shop in our shops downtown. So those type of partnerships are really critical as far as I'm concerned in our operation as far as the city.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Morley, what is your position on the city's role in public-private partnerships?
In 1990, the city of Elmhurst adopted their comprehensive plan, their first comprehensive plan. In 2009, we revised and revamped the comprehensive plan and subsequently adopted that again. We most recently added to the comprehensive plan just last month when we added an addendum, which is a bicycle plan. The comprehensive plan, as stated in the comprehensive plan, is our chief tool in guiding and facilitating the growth in Elmhurst. That comprehensive plan is a 146-page document that included the citizens of Elmhurst input, the businesses, and city staff, and it goes out decades and decades, and it sets the plan of what we want to see as a city. If we don't embrace these public-private partnerships, that vision that we put in place will never happen. So that is something that I think we need to support, these public-private partnerships. The Hahn Street property, for example, that's a great example of how we want to extend our gateway. We have a great central business district, but we want to extend the gateway of Elmhurst all the way up to North Avenue so people, when they're driving through, know what's there. But we have to be careful. As much as we want a seat at the table and be able to provide these developers with a 35,000 feet idea of what we want, we must be careful in how we steer them. So for example, as the comprehensive plan calls for, the Hahn Street project will have sidewalk front retail with residential above it and plenty of parking, which I think we all agree we need. But what we have to be careful of is when that developer comes into town and we say we want 20,000 square feet of retail space, we really shouldn't take it that much farther. No one's more in tune with that market and what's going to be successful than successful developers. So what we don't want to do is go to that developer and say, hey, we've got 20,000 square feet. I'd like to see you break that up into 4 or 5,000 square foot retail shops, and I'd like to see a shoe store and an ice cream shop and a restaurant. We have to be careful in this and allow the free market to dictate what we do. So while public-private partnerships are imperative, and it's the only way that we're going to have a town that flows and develops the way we want, we have to be careful in how we use them, but I am in support of them.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Gutenkopf, what is your position on the city's role in public-private partnerships?
Thank you. I think public-private partnerships are successful when the city's goals line up with the goals of the developers. These partnerships have the potential to create public benefit throughout Elmhurst, although we have focused them primarily in the central business district with projects such as the Larch Street parking deck. Long-range city planning will help us define other key areas and projects that should receive our attention. Once we've reviewed our current goals, evaluated them against the current economy, and defined new development goals and objectives, it'll be clearer for us to identify appropriate partners to achieve this. I disagree with Alderman. I lost my voice. I disagree with Alderman Morley a little bit. I do think that the city should play a role in defining what kinds of businesses we might want to encourage, having those conversations with developers, and I think that's part of what the public-private partnership should be all about. If the city identifies through appropriate strategic planning what kinds of a mix we want in the downtown, we have a responsibility and a role to play to say that we're looking for a partner to help us achieve those goals. We have a great comprehensive plan, which is primarily a zoning document, and not really the same kind of strategic plan that identifies broader goals and objectives for the city overall. I also think that we should continue to
Give it another try. We'll see if the mic's working again.
Here we go.
There you go.
I also think we should continue to explore these large projects while being open to public-private partnerships on a much smaller scale. I want to work with small businesses to identify projects that we may overlook if we're always focusing on large-scale development. I think we should explore these partnerships with community groups that want to accomplish goals in common with us as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Question number 5 will be answered in the order of Alderman Morley, Alderman Gutenkopf, and Alderman Mulliner. Question 5. Land acquisition is often required as part of public-private partnerships for public and civic uses or for economic development. While rarely employing the tool of eminent domain, Elmhurst has purchased property to foster development in the past. The question, Alderman Morley, what is your position on the city's role in land acquisition and development?
Let me go first to the question of eminent domain as a development tool. I am 100% against eminent domain as a development tool. I don't even like to use the threat of eminent domain. I don't think that's the kind of town we are. That just ends in lawsuits. If someone's fortunate enough in town to own a piece of property and we in town believe that that should be part of a larger development, then we need to bring that person to the table. So as far as eminent domain, I am a no. Land acquisition as part of a development tool and the city's involvement with that is a complicated issue. Let's take the Hahn Street project, for example. I think the Hahn Street project's made up of around 10 or 11 parcels of land, and I believe 9 of them were acquired before I was actually on the city council, and there's 1 more to go. I think that the process that we followed to acquire property for the Hahn Street properties was a mistake. I am not a buy and hold type of person as it relates to the acquisition of property and using them in development. Ultimately, I think that puts us in a weak position and can create problems when we're actually trying to develop those areas. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not working as hard as we can to develop that property, and I think we will, but it puts us in an interesting position. So I don't like the idea of a buy and hold process as it relates to property acquisition for development. I will say this, that there are times and there will be opportunities in a mature town like Elmhurst. We're not getting any more land. So if there's an opportunity that comes up and somebody needs 1 acre of land and it's owned by 3 different people and you have almost this puzzle piece look to it, well, there's a time where the city can step in and possibly talk to those people who might not even be talking to each other and figure out a way to pull those properties together and figure out a way to pull those properties together and create a successful development.
You're back online.
And we're back. Figure out a way to create a successful development. But in the acquisition of property and those type of opportunities, I would want to see those type of developments be part of the whole process, and it would not be a buy and hold process. So if there's any land acquisition that has to happen, it's part and parcel with the development, and it will happen immediately upon transfer of property, and that development will get started. So yes, there is a role the city can play if there are opportunities, but if it ever comes to a buy and hold, I'm against that. The city shouldn't be in speculation. We should be fostering growth and doing what we can to tie those properties together and get them developed.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Gutenkopf, what is your position on the city's role in land acquisition and development?
Well, I think I agree with Alderman Morley a lot on this. I think eminent domain is used extensively in Illinois, and I don't favor using this as a tool to amass land for city projects. We should be negotiating a fair price that's fair to both the seller and the taxpayers. I don't think the city should be seizing private property. Critics may raise issue that a strong stance against eminent domain to benefit the city hinders development. I hear that, but I respect private property rights too much to say that this is something we should be doing. And as for land acquisition, the question boils down to this: is it the place of the city to be buying land to encourage development? I believe the city can play a legitimate role here by purchasing land. In this way, the city can act as a facilitator. It's getting late, isn't it? To encourage development on a piece of property that would otherwise just sit idle and unproductive. But most important for me is that we should not be purchasing land unless we do so in a guided fashion, following a clear long-term plan for the type of development we want and a map for how to get there. We need to have a point and a purpose. We shouldn't just be buying land to aggregate it. And I keep mentioning long-term planning. And as mayor, I think this is really my first priority, that we need a long-term strategic and economic plan for the city that, coupled with evaluation tools that help us know if we've achieved our desired effect, will allow us to appropriately direct our development efforts throughout the city. So basically, without a clear point and a long-term plan, I don't think we should be buying land for the sake of just having it. That it's about facilitating development with partners that are going to help us achieve those goals overall. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Mulliner, what is your position on the city's role in land acquisition and development?
Well, I'm the longest sitting alderman here, so I've had probably more experience in it than everybody else who's here. And we've had very successful situations, and we've had some that have been not so successful. TIF up on Lake Street, the TIF on Lake Street was an extremely successful situation. Along Lake Street, right next to Walnut, we had a series of landowners who did not want to sell property together. They all were fighting with each other. We went in there and we were able to negotiate with them and purchase a large chunk of property, which now holds 3 car dealerships. That was a very good use of the purchase of land and putting it together so that it was large parcels that were usable by the city in order to generate revenue for us. Not the best use was the one that we have on Hahn Street. It will be an effective use. Unfortunately, the economy went in a tank on us as that process was going forward. We did have a developer online, but as the economy turned on us, it caused us some problems, and unfortunately that project did not get finished in the timely manner that it should be. I will also say that during my tenure, we've also done eminent domain. I don't necessarily support eminent domain. I don't think we should use it as a primary tool. I think it should be an absolute last resort. I'm a strong believer in property rights, and I think that we need to make sure that anybody who owns a piece of property, we negotiate fairly with them and get a fair price for their property, and they get a fair price for the property. I agree that we should have a plan if we're going to put pieces of property together. I can remember on Schiller Avenue when Freebrand Heating was over there, and we negotiated with them in order to switch things around so that we could get a parking lot over there so that the clinic could stay over in those areas. So we've done a large number of things where we've acquired property, and we work very effectively with property owners in order to make things happen that are effective, and that's what we want to continue to do. We want to take in land where it's appropriate, but we want to get rid of it as quickly as possible, and if at all possible, get a fair price for that land when that development is moving forward. I see the North Avenue, the North TIF 4 that we just put in place is a perfect opportunity for us to maybe able to bring some of those pieces of property together and bring in a restaurant or something on that order that may not feel that they have the room right now to do that. So I think there's some great opportunities for us, but we need to have a long-term plan as to where that's going.
Thank you, Alderman. We are down to our 6th question, so this will be your last chance. If you have a question to write in on your index card and bring it to Tom Paravola, make sure you get it over to Tom. Our 6th question, the order of answer will be Alderman Gutenkopf, Alderman Mulliner, Alderman Morley. Question number 6, Home rule units of local government like Elmhurst are authorized to impose a home rule sales tax, which are imposed on the same general merchandise base as the state sales tax, excluding titled or registered tangible personal property, you all knew that, such as vehicles, watercraft, aircraft, trailers, mobile homes, basically your cars and trucks. And qualified food, drugs, and medical appliances. Elmhurst charges 0.75% tax on retail sales and a 1% home rule tax on food and beverage sales. Alderman Gutenkopf, the question is, what is your position on the use of home rule taxes as a revenue source?
Thank you. Elmhurst currently has 5 home rule taxes. Sales, we've heard of some of them. Sales, the real estate transfer tax, the municipal gas use tax, we have a gasoline tax, and the food and beverage tax. They raise revenue for the general fund, and they're a boon for the city because they really help to keep property taxes down. One benefit to these specific taxes is that they target only the users of these goods and services, so they help broaden our city's tax base. One downside I hear quite frequently is that residents often feel nickeled and dimed. Everywhere they turn, they're getting taxed. I do take that concern to heart, and in fact, I did not support our $0.015 gasoline tax because I was concerned that that ultimately could hurt local businesses by forcing gasoline sales outside of the city. People might go to neighboring towns to purchase gas, or it could force the gas station owners to absorb that tax to remain competitive. It's generating significant revenue for the general fund. Anecdotally, I hear that people don't purchase gasoline in town. I think that they can be a real struggle. Ultimately, though, the city's ability to use these taxes judiciously, to systematically review our revenue sources, and to strike the appropriate balance is really the answer for meeting our revenue expectations. Property taxes can't be the only way that we fund the city. So use taxes, which most of these home rule taxes are, that just target the users of services, are an appropriate way for the city to broaden the tax base overall. However, I would be very reticent to support additional home rule taxes on residents, businesses, and users of services in Elmhurst. I think they work as part of the toolkit, and I don't want to see them grow. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Mulliner, what is your position on the use of home rule taxes as a revenue source?
The city of Elmhurst relies a significant amount on sales tax as far as its revenue in order for it to maintain its operation, and because of that ability to use those taxes, we're able to reduce the amount that we use on property taxes, freeing those taxes up for other organizations to use. I'm one of the supporters that says we shouldn't raise those taxes anymore. We had a discussion at one point in the Finance Committee, and it was a very brief discussion about the idea of looking at the hotel motel tax and saying, well, maybe what should we do there? We're not generating as much revenue as we were at one time. And my philosophy was, we shouldn't be raising it. What we should be doing is looking at economic development. Where can we put another hotel in town that makes sense? And we need to look at some of those options where maybe we can put a hotel in that makes sense. Maybe we can clean up some of the hotels that are in town so that we can actually bring businesses into town and people want to stay in some of those hotels. I used the crazy thought of looking at the corner of Addison and First Avenue as a spot to put another hotel. If you put a hotel at Addison and First Avenue, now you've got a spot where it's adjacent to the college, and that could be a spot for a small boutique hotel where businesses, people come in, they jump on the train, they come back, and they spend their dollars in downtown Elmhurst. If they want to go to the college, they go over to the college, and they're right there. So these are the types of things that we need to look at. Rather than trying to continually increase it, we need to look at where can we increase the number of businesses that are in town so that we have those revenues coming in through other means. And not only increase them, but also make sure that the businesses in town have the opportunity to expand if they want to expand. And that's a really critical piece of it as well, making sure that we give that opportunity for expansion in town. Retention is very critical in everything we do.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Morley, what is your position on the use of home rule taxes as a revenue source?
The state of Illinois allows communities of over 25,000 through referendum to determine whether or not they want to be home rule and allow for these home rule sales tax. And there's a reason for that. When you have a population that exceeds 25,000, there's going to be certain pockets in town, certain industries that potentially could have a need for that type of a tax. Now, nobody likes taxes, but let's face it, when you have a very successful business district, there are additional costs associated with that business district. There's infrastructure costs, safety costs, cleanup, streetscaping, you name it. There's a lot of cost to the city as it relates to, let's say, for example, a successful business district. How is the city supposed to pay for that type of service that it needs to provide to keep a successful business district? Well, one of the things we can do is use this targeted tax. And what it allows not only is for the people who use that area to tax it, it's really one of the few opportunities we have in the city of Elmhurst to bring in outside tax dollars. So when those people come to our town, they use our parking, use our streets, use our sidewalks, we actually can tax them. So we're bringing outside taxes into town. And that's the reason for the use of this targeted tax. It's very important when we consider a tax of this nature that we don't create a tax exodus. So for example, the food and beverage tax puts us on par or actually lower than the communities around us, Oak Brook, Lombard, et cetera. A lot of the folks we compete with are on par with us, or we're actually a little lower. What we don't want to do is say, well, it costs X, let's create a 5% tax. Well, that's going to create a tax exodus, and that's what we don't need. Now, the other thing we need to consider when we're going to do a home rule tax is the product itself or the service that we're looking to tax. How elastic or how price sensitive is that product? So, for example, gasoline. Not a lot of brand loyalty with gasoline, and there was a gasoline tax proposed which I voted against. I disagreed with. We've got parts in town, for example, up on York and Grand, where we've got Elmhurst-based gas stations competing with Bensonville gas stations. And we know that if gas is $4 a gallon in Bensonville and $4.05 a gallon in Elmhurst, we're going to lose that revenue. So we have to be very sensitive when putting together taxes like this to the businesses they're going in. Conversely, is a 1% food and beverage tax, is 30 cents on a $30 lunch bill going to cost an exodus? I don't think so. That doesn't mean it's not a burden on that restaurant to track that. It doesn't mean it's not a burden on that restaurant to charge that tax, but we have to be very careful when we do it. Ultimately, what it boils down to, though, is if revenue is needed to support those services that we have to provide in a central business district, for example, do we go to the Elmhurst taxpayers and the Elmhurst residents and raise property tax, or do we do what we can to target the folks who are using those services and try to generate the revenue that way? So I agree with the use of home rule sales tax. We just need to be very judicious when we use them.
Thank you, Alderman. Give our Alderman a nice round of applause. We are through our prepared questions. I would be remiss if I didn't point out that in partnership with the City of Elmhurst, the Elmhurst Chamber has for the past 2 years been running a informational shop local campaign called Got It in Elmhurst, designed, thank you. Come on, you can do better than that, folks, all right? Yeah. Designed to stress to Elmhurst residents the importance of spending dollars locally as opposed to taking them out of town. And I'm happy to report that since the campaign's in place, the city has generated $1.5 million more in retail sales tax than they had budgeted for. So those are really nice numbers. We do have questions from the audience, and we have culled through them amazingly. Tom and I sat down and we reviewed every one diligently, and we picked out 3 that we're going to ask. So now you're on your own on these. You know, no prep time on these. We will go back to our original order for the next 3 questions as we had started. So for this unprepared question, the order will be Alderman Mulliner, Alderman Morley, Alderman Gutenkopf. Sorry about that, Mark.
That's okay.
Yeah. They're all going to get a question, so that's just the way it is. The question from the audience. One of the hallmarks of effective government is compromise. Please cite one example when you compromised for the benefit of Elmhurst.
There's been a number of opportunities for us to compromise as we worked our way through a number of different things. One of the things was the gas aggregation project that we went forward. I'm sorry, electric aggregation. On the electric aggregation, that was a compromise that was put forth as we worked our way through that in the Finance Committee. There was two different opinions on how far we should go with the green energy versus the brown energy, and we came up with a compromise that seems to have worked very effectively for the city of Elmhurst.
Thank you very much. Alderman Morley.
John, I'm going to ask you to repeat the question.
That's fine. I'm planning to repeat it for everybody. One of the hallmarks of effective government is compromise. Please cite one example when you compromise for the benefit of Elmhurst.
I do think that compromise is key, and it's very important that when we are faced with a decision, while we have 14 people on the city council who all have opinions, it's important that we keep our eye on the goal. I call it herding cats. It's something that's very difficult to do, but what we need to do is make sure that we keep in mind that what we're doing is for the citizens of Elmhurst. So compromise is key. An example I would cite for compromise is the creation of the TIF 4 district. We worked with our fellow taxing bodies and our fellow aldermen to create TIF 4. Ultimately, from the proposed map to the map we ended up with, we were at about 97% of the original map that was proposed. I was working very closely and had the good fortune to work very closely with the school board on this. During these negotiations and during the development of this TIF district, I was talking to the school board president, Jim Collins, and he said, you know, this is going to be a challenge for us. We face budget problems every year. And I said, I recognize that, Jim. We're doing what we can to create an intergovernmental agreement. Well, Jim and I put our heads together and we said, you know what? There's two schools right next to the development district, and we looked into it, and yes, indeed, you can include schools in your TIF map. So that is one thing where we know that a TIF district allows Elmhurst to be competitive and bring commercial property or commercial industries into town, but we also need to be sensitive to our fellow taxing bodies. And we've been working with we have been working with the school board over the past year to do that. As was mentioned, we recently, the school board recently passed the intergovernmental agreement, the most progressive revenue sharing agreement in the state of Illinois. So that's a good thing. And actually getting the TIF district approved by the city council was approved 13-1. We were dealing with input from the various members of the city council for over a year, and ultimately I think we ended up with a great development district in town.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Gutenkopf, one of the hallmarks of effective government is compromise. Please cite one example when you compromise for the benefit of Elmhurst.
Thank you. The example that springs to my mind involves a land vacation in the Lake and Walnut Street TIF district. A business came to the city because they wanted to sell property they owned on either side of a street that is, for all intents and purposes, not in use anymore, but the city still owns. They wanted to sell land they owned on either side so they could move within the TIF. An adjacent property owner wanted to buy the new land so that he could expand. We spent a lot of time on the Public Works and Buildings Committee discussing this land vacation. Committee members, this is the committee I'm on, other members of my committee felt that because the city didn't really use this property, that it had no value and we should give it to the business that wanted to acquire it from us. I didn't think that was a fair deal for the taxpayers, and I thought that what should be guiding our decision is the policy that the city has established for land vacations that involves evaluating the EAV of the property and starting negotiations at a percentage of that EAV. The issue for me is that it's a piece of city property. It essentially belongs to everyone in the city. And if we're going to vacate that property to someone, there should be a compromise that seeks value for the taxpayers and encourages growth and encourages something to happen on that property. So through negotiation at the committee, we arrived at what I consider to be an appropriate and fair value. The taxpayers benefited because the city received payment for this piece of property. The city overall benefits because now the TIF has an opportunity to see an expansion within the district. The business that was acquiring the property benefits because it made it easier for them to sell their land to the business that is now expanding. So everyone benefits. The compromise happened, the land was vacated, and the city and the TIF district ultimately will be strengthened.
Thank you, Alderman. Audience question number 2. The order of answer will be Alderman Morley, Alderman Gutenkopf, Alderman Mulliner. Folks, you should have expected to get this question up here, given who's hosting today. Please give me your opinion of City Center as an organization and what it does for the downtown Elmhurst. Alderman Morley.
Thank you, John. I think that City Center is a fantastic organization whose sole purpose is to promote downtown businesses. I don't think you could ask for a better organization to do that. The other thing is that the City Center has to work with all of the other business districts in town and business entities, not only the Chamber, but the Spring Road Business District, the Villette Road Business District, and I think that's a balance that the City Center does quite well. I also think that the City Center, through the creative use of SSAs, does a fantastic job in highlighting downtown Elmhurst as the jewel when people come into town, especially during the holiday season. I think they do a wonderful job in promoting business outside of Elmhurst and bringing those tax dollars into Elmhurst. And it's a fantastic organization that we should support 100%.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Gutenkopf, please give me your opinion of City Center as an organization and what it does for downtown Elmhurst.
I think having a central business district is key for any city, and that we're very fortunate that we have such a strong organization with paid staff. I don't think that is particularly common. I think for Elmhurst, the outgrowth out of the old Main Street program, which was the foundation for aggregating this business district together, has resulted over the time that I've been in Elmhurst in a thriving central district. I think many residents don't really understand that the SSA money that goes to City Center to support some of the downtown maintenance and beautification projects and the central marketing is really a pass-through tax imposed upon the businesses by the businesses themselves. And I think that's the real strength of City Center, is that you've got a business organization that is willing to tax itself so it can function in aggregate and do something much stronger than individual businesses could do by themselves. And that's an important component to keep that whole district strong. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Mulliner, please give me your opinion of City Center as an organization and what it does for downtown Elmhurst.
City Center is a model for what other towns should be doing as it relates to how to maintain a downtown and how to entice businesses into town. When it first started up, it had a different role than it does now. In the beginning, it had a role of more enticing businesses to come into town. Now it has a role more of trying to maintain the businesses that are there and bring in more visitors into the downtown area. And they've done a tremendous job with it, and it's a perfect model for other downtowns to grab onto. There's a number of towns that surround us that wish that they had a downtown and would be able to have the type of organization we have. We have a very professional staff that does a great job of marketing the downtown. We have great business owners in the downtown that contribute to that organization. And it is just as important for everybody to understand those SSAs, because a lot of people think that those SSAs are dollars that the city should control. They're really not. Those are dollars that pass right straight through and go over to that organization so that they can provide the ambiance that's downtown, so that people are willing to come downtown and see what there is. And I think it's a tremendous asset to the community.
Thank you, Alderman. Audience question number 3, answered in this order: Alderman Gutenkopf, Alderman Mulliner, Alderman Morley. Fitting last question for our evening. What are your top priorities upon being elected? Alderman Gutenkopf.
Thank you. I think I've mentioned this. My top priority is to engage the city in a long-range strategic and economic plan, because I think it establishes clear goals and objectives, and it gives us a tool to weigh our decision-making against. We don't have a clear vision and a clear plan that incorporates residents, businesses, property owners, and city government. We're always chasing the next shiny thing. And it's easy to get distracted by good ideas, but a plan gives you a framework for evaluating those ideas against your resources and your goals. The city manager was hired with this idea that he brought to us to say, you know, this is something I want to do for Elmhurst. And I think we've given him a great opportunity to get used to the city and how it functions, and it's time for us to dive into this planning. A long-range strategic and economic plan is not the same thing as a comprehensive plan. Our comprehensive plan addresses zoning issues. It was developed in the same kind of partnership that our strategic plan would reflect. All of the players having an opportunity to weigh in on what's important to them, and it would address a wide variety of issues. And it would give us a way to predict, react against changes in the outside environment, and would force us to look ahead. And I think that would be a top priority because it influences everything else that the city would do.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Mulliner, what are your top priorities upon being elected?
Because of the fact that this is a Chamber City Center event, I'm going to focus them strictly on economic development opportunities rather than everything that's out there. One of my top priorities is to change the format of the Liquor Commissioner. As most of you know, the Liquor Commissioner is the other role that the mayor runs, and my feeling is that we need to break that off and make that into a Liquor Commission, a 5-member board that helps to determine who gets liquor licenses and helps to control the environment within the liquor environment. So I feel that that's one of the first things that we want to do. Another thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that we're focused on some of these areas that we need to do development. And I think that we have to focus on the areas where it's ripe, there's low-hanging fruit for development. I think that the North Industrial Park is one of the areas that's ripe for opportunities. I think we can get in there and we can change that to a 6-story opportunity fairly effectively and fairly quickly. I think we need to focus very quickly on Hahn Street and the Addison LLC. And we also need to focus on some of the other areas within the town that aren't in TIFs, such as the area down by the hospital where the old fire station was, where there's perfect opportunity for some development, some areas over on Riverside Drive. So we really need to focus our energy on redevelopment where there's low-hanging fruit, where we can get some things moving fairly quickly, and at the same time make sure that the businesses that are there that want to expand have that opportunity to expand.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Morley, what are your top priorities upon being elected?
Thank you, John. I would say that by virtue of this question, I think you have shortened everybody's closing statement by about 15%. I believe that my number one priority, as you can see in my closing statement, is revenue. Without revenue, without a strong economic engine behind us, we can't provide the services that the businesses and the residents of Elmhurst want. Now, we can create new revenue through really 2 ways. One is increased taxes, which I don't want to do. The other is through new growth, and that's the key. In my opinion, the biggest opportunity for new growth in town is through business and commercial development. Specifically, that North York corridor that we just created into a development district. For the most part, and I've been in town my whole life, for the most part, from Hamburger Heaven all the way to Grand Avenue, there has been very limited development in that area. That area grows at 1/3 the rate of the rest of Elmhurst commercial properties. And if you think about that, there's a disparity that gets bigger every year. These folks over here are subsidizing that group. With the exception of the Holiday Inn changing its name every 5 years, very limited growth happens up there, and we need to focus on that. Now, if we focus on that and we bring in new revenue, when we get to the budget season, we're not talking about what we're going to cut or what services we have to cut simply because of inflation. The fact of the matter is, with inflation, our costs are going to go up. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. So my top priority is revenue growth, and stemming from all of that revenue growth will be what we need to do and operate as a successful city, provide city services, provide a safe environment for both the businesses and the residents of Elmhurst.
Thank you, Alderman. Give our Alderman a nice round of applause again for the audience questions. We are now to the 2-minute closing remarks. If some of you have to amend your closing remarks, some of you are going to have more time to amend them than others. We are going to do closing remarks in reverse order of their position on the ballot. So it will be Alderman Mulliner, Alderman Gutenkopf, and Alderman Morley in that order. Alderman Mulliner, your closing statements.
First off, thank you all for being here this evening and giving us the opportunity to discuss economic development and the issues that are in front of us that relate to economic development. I want to make it clear that, to me, economic development is the tool that we need in order to generate all of that revenue that's necessary to run the city. It's the tool that we need to make sure that we've got a vibrant downtown where people can go and shop and they can have coffee and they can eat dinner. It's the tool that we need in order to make sure that we have safe environments, so that we have the police department with all of the equipment that they need, with the newest and best equipment possible. So we have the fire department with the best training possible, so that if something happens, they're able to respond to it quickly. So that we have the dollars necessary to do things such as rebuild our infrastructure. We've got an aging infrastructure in Elmhurst, and we need to make sure that we can address those issues. But it's all based on what we can do with economic development. The more money we can get out of businesses because of the fact that we've got more businesses in town, the better off we're going to be, because we can keep the property taxes low. In no way do I have an interest in raising taxes anyplace. What I'd like to do is entice businesses to come in. I'd like to entice businesses to expand in this community, because this is a wonderful community. We have a great opportunity. Most people who came here back in the 40s and 50s came here because of location, location, location. And that's exactly why people still come here. Location, location, location. And yes, they like the schools, but they know they can get to any place that they want to, and that's true with businesses as well. We need to provide those incentives where necessary, but if at all possible, we need to utilize that concept that we have the best location in the state of Illinois to access any other place. And that's the thing that I think we need to really focus on, and I really think that we have opportunities here that we just haven't really held on to and driven home hard enough in the last few years, and I think we have an opportunity to do that in the next few years. Thank you very much, and remember to vote on April 9th for me.
Hey, if you don't ask.
There you go.
Good point.
Alderman Gutenkopf, your closing remarks.
Thank you. I bring 25 years of strategic planning and nonprofit business experience to City Hall, along with a strong sense of fiscal responsibility. A long-range strategic and economic plan will afford us the economic growth that my colleagues are talking about. I've served as First Ward Alderman since 2007, and in that position I've served on 3 committees. I've been on the Development Planning and Zoning Committee, Finance and Council Affairs, and currently I'm on Public Works and Buildings. This affords me a lot of experience and a deep understanding in key areas of city operations. I believe my dedication to a city government run by officials who listen and respond to their constituents helps to set me apart from other candidates. As alderman, I've worked tirelessly to keep my ward informed and acted as their voice on the council, because I believe that talking directly with the people I represent and in maintaining regular contact through all kinds of tools brings city government out there and makes me a better representative, because I truly understand the issues. This openness creates transparency, and I'm very dedicated to that goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Alderman. Alderman Morley, your closing remarks.
Thank you, John. Whatever will I say? First of all, thank you, everybody. Thank you all for coming here and giving us this opportunity to speak to you. I think that everybody in this room would agree that Elmhurst is an absolutely fantastic town. To keep Elmhurst fantastic, I believe Elmhurst needs strong, ethical, positive leadership with an eye on progressive solutions and a commitment to good government. I may have mentioned in the past that I think revenue is key for Elmhurst, and I believe that. We have an opportunity in town with new growth and new leadership to set the economic table for Elmhurst for the next 50 years. There's no question that Elmhurst and its residents care about Elmhurst. Just knock door to door and you'll get an earful, and people do care. We have 14 aldermen in town. They're in 7 different wards. They see people every day taking their kids to school, shopping at the grocery store, shopping in downtown Elmhurst. They are the eyes and ears. They bring what Elmhurst wants back to City Council and back to City Hall. For those services and for those needs to be met, we do need to set the economic table for the next 50 years. And I think we need to do that by showing the outside business interests that we're interested in their dollars, and we need to compete for those finite dollars that are out there from a development standpoint. We are in competition with our fellow towns that surround us. The last thing I will say is I will ask for your vote on April 9th, or early voting. And this is important because the Elmhurst front porch that was sent out at the time was correct, said that early voting would not happen in the city of Elmhurst. Very happy, as John Quigley mentioned, to say that early voting is happening in Elmhurst, and it runs from March 25th through April 5th. Thank you.
Thank you. Once again, give our candidates a nice round of applause. You're not getting up yet. I got some closing remarks. When I opened up, I gave you some pretty sad numbers regarding the last year there was a mayoral election in Elmhurst. Only 43% of the registered voters in Elmhurst got out and voted for their mayor, as well as aldermen and other races. Well, if you think that was bad, in 2011, without a mayoral race, only 23% of Elmhurst's 28,760 registered voters cast a ballot. Now, there were 2 uncontested aldermanic races fitting in there, but even if you factored that out, only 25% of the registered voters went out for the other 5 aldermanic races, 1 out of every 4. So if you're not content in letting an engaged minority decide who will govern your municipality, your public schools, your parks, your libraries, and such, then you need to get out and vote on April 9. I will again remind you, March 26, early voting, starting at Elmhurst City Hall. March 25th, sorry. Take advantage of it. And I will leave you with this final story. It's from one of my favorite episodes of The West Wing. And it had to do with a gentleman who was running a congressional race out in California. And some of his volunteers had done up a sign, and they were racing out the door. And he said, wait a minute, let me take a quick peek at the sign. And he looked at it, and the sign read, "It doesn't matter who you vote for, just vote." And the gentleman said, no, I think it does matter who you vote for. So change the sign, as Will Bailey would say, to no matter who you vote for, make sure you vote. Thank you for your attention this evening, and we'll see you on Elmhurst, Our Kind of Town.
The Churchville Schoolhouse opens the door to the best education in history. Visitors to the Churchville Schoolhouse take a step back in time to watch history unfold in a restored National Register of Historic Places property that dates to the Civil War era. Students of today walk in the footsteps of local farm children from the early days of DuPage County for an authentic living history experience led by a schoolmarm of the early 1900s. A visit to the Churchville Schoolhouse is hands-on, educational, and fun. Participants use slate chalkboards and McGuffey readers for the day's lessons. And children will be asked to follow proper classroom etiquette. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are practiced, and students test their skills during an old-fashioned spelling bee. And of course, no school day is complete without recess featuring games of the early 1900s. The schoolhouse is a popular place for scouts and day camps too. Group visits can also be arranged for service clubs, tour groups, and other adult organizations. The Churchville Schoolhouse Living History program is operated by the Elmhurst Historical Museum. Call the museum today to book a field trip or find out more information. Call 630-833-1457 or visit our website at churchvilleschoolhouse.org. The Churchville Schoolhouse is waiting to open the doors for your school or community group. Plan a memorable learning experience today for the best education in history.
Hi, I'm John Quigley, President and CEO of the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In these challenging economic times, it's imperative that our residents and businesses band together to not only shop Elmhurst, but buy Elmhurst whenever possible. We have great stores in our city center, Spring Road, Butterfield Road, York and Villette Streets, St. Charles and Route 83, North Avenue and Lake Street, along North York and even Grand Avenue. I ask for your help. Let's keep our tax dollars in Elmhurst.